Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Matt from Matt's Bookshelf, and I am finally back with Matt's Bookshelf BookTube video. It's been a little while. I wanted to make a 6-month recap video, but I got busy after having a very relaxing and wandering trip to Munich, and then to the Austrian Alps, and then finally to Vienna.
So we are over the worst part of the trip. How do you feel?
Good. I'm not even tired yet.
Yeah, right.
We do this all day.
All right.
All
Another
day.
round. Let's go back down, come back up. Why not?
How do you feel, Matt?
I feel awful. I'm surprised I've been thrown up, to be honest.
Please, be calm, be calm,
Oh,
be calm.
How are you feeling, guys?
I'm feeling good.
Feeling
Just gotta
good?
finish.
Feeling good?
Got some good apple strudel.
Strudel.
Yeah, feeling pretty good. Yeah.
Where are you going, Christian?
I'm going to look at the church.
Nice.
Magnifique.
You need to clear your sins.
What?
It's
Oh, it's a video. Oh.
Yeah.
How does the kebab song go? Is that a little loud? What do you want in your kebab?
Everything. Yeah. First nugget ever. What do you think?
Disappointing.
But now I'm back into the United States, and instead of doing a 6-month recap, I'm instead going to do a video in which I talk about all of the books that I have read in 2024 so far. The first book I finished was Gravity's Rainbow. Perhaps the reason why I don't have as many books finished as the normal booktuber would at this point is because of this monstrosity. Gravity's Rainbow is written by my dad, Thomas Pynchon, and it is considered by a lot of literary scholars to be one of, if not the greatest postmodernist novel. This is of course part of my series in which I read all of Thomas Pynchon's works called Project Pynchon, and I do have a video where I go more in depth as to my thoughts on this book, but broadly speaking, this book comes with a lot of hype around it. Everyone who's read it has had an opinion of it, and even though I tried to go into this book as blindly as possible, but I know general things about the novel, and that being said, the absurdity and craziness with which this book goes still absolutely shocked me. It's going to be one of the best books I read in 2024. It will almost certainly be in my top 3 books when I do my favorite books of 2024 video at the end of the year. It's a book that has lasted with me for a very long time. I have very mixed emotions on Thomas Pynchon so far if you've been watching the series, and what you'll understand from watching this video as well. But Gravity's Rainbow is a book that exceeds the already tremendous hype that it has around it. Next up, I have At Swim to Birds by Flann O'Brien. It is a Irish novel written in the decades after Joyce published Ulysses. It centers around a English student from University College Dublin. So, yeah, has my heart there. But he is living with his uncle. He's a young student living with his uncle, and the uncle is constantly harassing him about, like, why is he not doing any work? And he's trying to explain to his uncle that he's a writer, he's doing work. Mom, I'm being productive right now. But the mom isn't in this book at all. I don't know where that came from. Flann O'Brien is a writer very much inspired by James Joyce and the Irish writers before him. The writer in this book is writing his own mythology tale where it takes a humorous look at classical mythological figures in Ireland. It's a book that I really wanted to love because I was also a student at University College Dublin and studied English there. I loved all the stuff in the quote-unquote present day of the book centered around the student, but when it came to the mythological tale he's telling, maybe just because I don't really understand exactly what he's talking about and like why it should be funny or subversive, it just didn't really hit with me as much as the main. Like, I kept wanting to go back to the main story, but most of the novel is the novel written by the character. That being said, a lot of the fantastical descriptions here by Conan O'Brien are tremendous. Like they sound Tolkien-esque. They sound William Butler Yeats-esque. So it's very well written. Just the humor, I think a lot of it went over my head because I'm just not very well informed in this subject. Speaking of books that I wasn't expecting to love but ended up loving, Rhodes in the Hellenistic Age by Richard Berthold. He is an academic scholar, a political activist of sorts as well, that being the professor who wrote this book. And there's like a disclaimer at the start of it where it's like, if you're not a scholar in Rhodes history, you probably shouldn't read this book. And I'm reading this book because I am working on a historical novel in which Rhodes isn't going to be a necessary part of it. I was very hesitant to go into the book because I'm reading the books I want to learn about Rhodes, not because not because I already have knowledge of Rhodes. And my God, it's really good. It's really engaging. Considering I basically knew nothing about what was going to happen, I was very intrigued. It reminds me a bit of, it's not quite as good as Ronald Sims' The Roman Republic, the Roman Revolution, but the way he's able to tell the story of Rhodes's rise and fall to a certain extent, and how it represented like this pinnacle of democratic rule, and how Rhodes was the kind of like the godfather of the Mediterranean islands area, and making sure everyone stayed in line, and how in order to survive, it made an alliance with Rome, but through that it managed to survive, but it compromised on its ideals and so forth, and therefore lost what made it special during the Hellenistic Age. And the way he goes to the details with like the successors to Philip and Alexander, the Persian rulers, the whole political landscape here, and how Rhodes, which is just this tiny island with a decent naval force, but not anything that could withstand like an empire like the Roman Empire, how it was able to keep itself relevant, hold on to its ideals, how through trial and error with its wars between like the average person and the like patrician rulers of Rhodes, how it managed to have this very sound and well-working democracy on this island, and how it managed to keep the region of islands that it had under its rule relevant, only for it to tragically downfall by the end. Again, excellent storytelling by Berthold here. It's not dry at all, honestly. The depth he goes into about how Rhodes worked, a little bit about the Colossus of Rhodes, and many of like the great minds that set foot on Rhodes. Very, very intriguing, and a book that has helped me a lot with my own research onto this age. Speaking of books that I was expecting to love, but ultimately, though invaluable with the information it gave me, is a book that I somewhat struggled to get through. That is Tiberius the Politician by Barbara Levick. It starts off great. I think Levick does a great job setting up the world Tiberius is being born into and what molds him as a young man, which is the part of Tiberius that I'm most interested in right now. But as the book goes on, I think it feels more like a dry recalling of history. It goes into extreme depths as to like Tiberius's rule and the people around him and his life, especially as he's emperor. But comparing it to the book I just mentioned, comparing it to Ronald Sims' Roman Revolution, and comparing it to even Tiberius the Resentful Caesar, which I read last year, it's just very dry in comparison. And I don't recommend historical writers to lie in their books, I would have preferred more of a story being told and more risks being taken with regards to speculation as to why things are happening. Ronald Sim just goes off. He always goes off. Like, I've read so many books on the fall of the Republic and the rise of an empire, and yet still he was able to, through his storytelling, when it's like Cicero, like a chapter ended like Cicero decided he was not going to take any more of this, and I'm like, yeah, Cicero, go get him, even though obviously I know what's going to happen to Cicero by the end. He's not going to win. Here, again, invaluable information, but I just wish it was delivered in a more energetic way. It's still very great. It's still, I mean, God, I can't imagine how much research went into this book. You know, years and years it had to have been, because it's very, very detailed in its bibliography by the end. But it just is ultimately a book that it felt like a chore to read through. I also read The Friend by Sigrid Nunes, a National Book Award winner. Don't be misled by the cover. This book is dark. It's fiction. I suppose it's fiction. Autofiction, maybe. I don't want to speculate. I know nothing about Sigrid Nunes, but it roughly follows the narration, the first person narration of an author whose boyfriend, who has had several wives before her, commit suicide, and her dealing with the fact that she was the last wife or girlfriend, and wondering like if she's somehow responsible for the suicide, knowing about his past dealings. This author, who was her husband or boyfriend, is a very troubled figure. But in order to deal with the grieving, one of the other wives are called like wife 1, wife 2. One of the former wives gives the narrator the author's dog, who's like this big dog, and at first she doesn't really know how to take care of it, and it's an older dog as well. So having dealt with, watching my own dog decline as well years ago, that stuff really hit home for me, like the being able to track the slow degradation. However, because she's also an author, there's also a lot being said about what role writing and art plays in one's mental state. For example, at one point, she runs a class for women, specifically prostitutes, who dealt with sexual abuse, and many of them use writing as a way to process the grief and the emotional damage they endured along the way. That stuff was very interesting to me. She pulls so many quotes from different philosophers and writers and great artists that really make you think about what depression is, why someone gets wrapped up into the arts to begin with, what it means to stay in a relationship or to deceive your partner and sleep around. It's a very, very interesting and thought-provoking book, very short as well, but it's a book that I read in just 2 days. I think it's very readable, and you just fly through it because she's constantly introducing new elements to her thesis, basically. And it's a very, very good book, and I'm not surprised it won the National Book Award. So the first ebook I read this year was The Waves by Virginia Woolf. It roughly follows a group of young aristocratic children in Great Britain, in England, as they deal with the loss of one of their friends, Percival, who dies while traveling to India. I have a very interesting relationship with Virginia Woolf because To the Lighthouse is one of the most profound books I've ever read in my life. And if you read this book and read The Waves after not knowing it's by Virginia Woolf, I would say you'd have a hard time figuring out it's by Virginia Woolf because, testament to her ability as a writer, she completely changes her writing style here. It's told from the perspectives of each of the 5 kids as time goes along. So you get perspectives of them as they're young, children, basically teenagers, and then into their 20s and 30s. It's a book that is very complex, and more complex than I was thinking it was going to be. And I don't think it's a book that I can fully process on a first read. It has some of the best prose that I'll read all year because it's Virginia Woolf, why not? But when it comes to the individual characters, I had a difficult time distinguishing them at points. It gets better and easier as it goes along, but I think it's a book that will reward rereads, knowing where the book goes towards, at the end. And so you can probably track different things that are set up in the beginning that are then paid off by the end. But it is an excellent book. It's an excellent experimentation in storytelling and prose style as well. Next up, I have Vineland by Thomas Pynchon. Again, another book I've already done a video on. It's my last video. Vineland has the unfortunate notoriety of being the follow-up to, again, one of the greatest novels of the 20th century, if not, by some critics, the best novel in the 20th century. I have very mixed thoughts on this book. I go into more detail in my video on it, so I will leave a link to my Project Pynchon series in the description below if you want my full thoughts. But it's good. It just doesn't last with me like, say, Gravity's Rainbow or The Crying of Lot 49. Next up is Flaubert in Egypt, my first ever Gustave Flaubert book. Flaubert, or I think that's how you actually say, or roughly as close as an American can say it. It's a travel writing piece, collection of letters and journals from Flaubert. I'm not going to do that every time, but Flaubert and his friends, who will go on to be distinguished writers and publishers in France. but Flaubert is the most famous of this group. It's excellent. I just went to Europe and I just wanted to read a piece of travel writing because I like to journal while I'm traveling, and I just wanted a little inspiration for like different things that I could talk about in my own journals. And so what's so great about Flaubert is that he's not afraid to get into the dark side of places. Again, excellent descriptions and like notes and thoughts about exploring this new society for him. But he likes to go into the nightlife as well, so you gotta appreciate that stuff as well. It's not like this clean depiction of these cities in Egypt. He's willing to get down and dirty with the cities. Really, really, willing to do that stuff. As for history, he gives a lot of great historical insights as well, cultural insights, and his friends as well give really great insights onto Flaubert at the time. And so it's really just an enjoyable, quick read that, like, as someone who loves both traveling and writing, it's a book that when I was reading I couldn't really put down and enjoyed from start to finish. Next up is a book that I snuck in right before I started recording this video. That is Eric Linklater's Poets Pub, one of the original Penguin classics in the UK. This is a book that Drunzo gave to me for my birthday, so I went in with pretty much no expectations of it. And this is the funniest book I've read this year. It is just a delight to read. It roughly follows a character named Saturday Keith, who is the son of a Scottish general who had 7 children. And each child just happened to be born on a different day of the week. So he was the last one, and so he's Saturday Keith. He is a former Oxford scholar and is now trying to break out into the literary world as a poet. But what's so funny about this is that his poems are terrible, and Linklater writes purposefully terrible poems for him with all these weird analogies and rhyme schemes and stuff. It's very funny. But he's basically given the option to run Pelican's Pub, the pub owned by his friend's mother. And it's here that he sort of finds new vigor for life. He meets this professor and her daughter, and his daughter named Joan, and he falls in love with Joan, and Joan's as an artist, and her chapters are very good as well. But it's a very quirky book and has very fun characters, and as someone who doesn't usually read light books and finds humor in them, this book was just such a joy to read. It has so many fun characters with kind of dark and ironic desires, but never not too dark. It's very light. It's a very lighthearted book, and even like when there's conflict, everyone's so like reasonable and understanding. But it has it's very like dry sense of humor that I quite enjoyed. Like there's a character, like another bartender, whose like greatest accomplishments is that he created a drink, and also that he was bayoneted by oppression. So it's like those are the two things those are his two claims for like why he's lived a good life. And like the conversations about literature are always funny, and like the age differences, like there's a lot of young characters talking with old characters and how they see the world differently. It just captures a sense that there's this pub in England that a bunch of artists flock to, whether it be photographers, painters, professors, literary scholars, poets, and they all just have different perspectives of the world. They're all somewhat unyielding of these perspectives, and it's just so fun to watch them all interact. And this is like the sleeper hit of 2024 for me so far. And I really want to read more Eric Linklater's books, that they're all as good as this one. And finally, as for current reads, I am finishing up Hyperion by Dan Simmons. It's a sci-fi novel. You've probably heard of it, and I'm just getting around to reading it now. It's absolutely excellent, and I cannot wait to read the rest of the series. I think I'm probably going to jump into book 2 as soon as I finish book 1, because I could describe the plot. I'm not finished with the book yet, so I don't really want to, but it's like the sci-fi version of Canterbury Tales, in which they fight, or I'm assuming they're going to fight at some point, a giant metal monster that, at least at this point of the novel, seems completely indestructible. What is so commendable about Dan Simmons here is that each of the characters on this pilgrimage is so distinct. They each have a unique relationship with the Shrike, and they each reveal a certain and new and horrifying aspect about the Shrike that makes this enemy feel like such an insurmountable foe. I'm like 70, according to my iPad, I'm 70% of the way through the book, and it's just so excellent. And finally, I have Mason and Dixon by Thomas Pynchon. As you can see, I am nearly done with this novel. It's an American epic like I've never read before personally. It has all of Pynchon's trademarks, but with this, but it's like a Pynchon book, but if he was to tell the story of the start of the American Revolution, basically. It's very good. It's very long, but I will go more into details as to how I feel about the book in a separate video, part of my Project Pynchon series. But it is a very enjoyable book. Definitely better than Vineland. Not as good as Gravity's Rainbow. But it's a book like Gravity's Rainbow that'll just keep you guessing as to what the hell is going on in the book. So that is my recap of 2024 so far. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what your top 3 favorite books are of the year, because I'm always open for more book recommendations. I've read a pretty diverse amount of books, I would say. I'm very happy with it. I probably would have read more if not for Gravity's Rainbow and Mason and Dixon, and Hyperion to a certain extent. They're all very long books. And then also when I traveled a lot, but I'm going to be home for a while for the rest. My calendar is going to be much more empty for the rest of the year, so I'm hoping to have more videos out. If you like this, check out my channel. Also, check out Film Frauds, a film podcast I do with your hero, Colorless Wonderland. I'll leave a link to that in the description below as well. Thank you for you made it this far, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.